Listen up, bandits. Whether I'm sprayed with alcohol or doused with food, hell, even if I'm spit on, most of the time I'll just laugh it off and forget about it. But if you hurt a friend of mine, you'll pay for it regardless of your reason.
For me, One Piece is undoubtedly one of the strongest shonen series of all time, and I can't fit all of my passion for One Piece into just a small handful of videos. So instead, I'm going to review all of One Piece, arc by arc, starting from the very beginning to whatever arc the manga is on when we get there. Since this is the very first arc of One Piece, I think a little background would help. One Piece got its start as a one-off story named Romance Dawn, where we follow an older-looking Luffy who can still stretch like rubber. The story also features Shanks and can be seen as an early prototype for what we now know as One Piece. After Romance Dawn, there is a second story also titled Romance Dawn, but this story features an early version of Vice Admiral Garp and Nami. Just a year after Romance Dawn, mangaka Ichiro Oda wrote the first chapter of his new series called One Piece. That first chapter was titled Romance Dawn. Now with that out of the way, we can dig into the first story arc of One Piece, also called Romance Dawn. One Piece's first arc is about 3 characters: our protagonist Monkey D. Luffy, Kobe, and a bounty hunter called Zoro. Each of them are very interesting to me for very different reasons. Luffy, while not having the most unique character when compared to anime now, back in the 90s, Luffy was weird. Luffy wasn't this cool character that everyone loved. He wasn't a muscular badass who would intimidate every rival that stood in his way, nor was he a child for kids to get attached to. Luffy was a scrawny teenager who made up for his lack of coolness and optimism. That kind of character was not all that common. Hell, even Goku, who was pretty comparable, started out as a child that children loved and grew into the muscular badass. Luffy started out dorky and is still to this day pretty dorky looking. Even comparing Luffy from One Piece to Luffy from Romance Dawn, Luffy became a lot more goofy looking over time. Shonen anime nowadays is dominated by dorky characters, and I can't help but feel that One Piece's success, even with an odd-looking main character, inspired the character designs we're seeing today. Other than Luffy, there's Kobe, who most viewers would assume after watching the first episode is a main character. He's set up like someone who'll be around. He's saved by Luffy and begins sailing with him, but then by the end of the 3rd episode, he just leaves to join the Marines. In almost every other show, the first ally the main character makes is a member of the main cast, but not here. I've always really liked how that defied my expectations. Kobe was the perfect bait for that bait and switch. The real addition to the crew turns out to be Zoro, taking Kobe's place immediately. Speaking of Zoro, he's a great contrast to Luffy. Luffy is so different from what was the norm. He wasn't cool or badass, but Zoro is as cool as it gets. He's a bounty hunter, he got captured by risking his life to save a little girl, he fights with swords, and he has a calm attitude when we first meet him that just makes him likable. I've always viewed him as the character who was supposed to hook people in because Luffy was different from the norm, but because of how different they are, he also works great with Luffy. Their contrast causes a lot of chemistry in their partnership. I'd say Zoro and Luffy working together is the highlight of this arc. It just works so well, it makes both Luffy more cool and Zoro more relatable and interesting. Sadly, the antagonists of this arc don't have the same interesting aspects. Both Axhan Morgan and Alvida don't add much to this arc other than being the opposition. Anyone could have been in their role, they didn't matter. As for a minor antagonist, there's Helmeppo. He does a great job at being hateable. Even his design is annoying, but I don't think Helmeppo is that great either. I can't say I enjoy watching him in this arc. He doesn't bring much value to the story other than being a small obstacle. Even though I don't think there's anything special about the villains, I will credit their designs. Axhan Morgan's hand alone is more interesting than a lot of characters from other shows, not to mention how unique both Helmeppo and Alvida look. Oda is a great artist, and it shows here. It's also really cool that within the first arc, they introduce both pirates and marines as villains and heroes, as that is still a primary aspect of the story right now. Despite all the cool concepts and unique ideas, the story doesn't generate the same excitement as all the ideas that surround it. This arc is, without a doubt, an arc that is just meant to set up the world. The actual things that happen in it aren't that interesting, and I think that's just because they don't need to be. But I still would have appreciated something more. It's just boring half the time because the villains don't really have any presence, and nor does Kobe, so if Luffy and Zoro aren't present, it's hard to stay invested. There is, however, one storyline that does drum up some interest, and that's the final episode of this arc, Episode 4, which is all about Luffy's past. Luffy's backstory is really well done. It feels nicely contained in this one episode. There's a feeling of consequence due to Shanks getting injured, and the characters are all interesting, from the bartender to Shanks' crew. In the manga, this was actually the first chapter, and it's a great introduction to One Piece. It feels a lot more like what One Piece later on becomes than what most of Romance Dawn feels like. So in closing, even though I have a lot of positive things to say about this arc, the story and the villains aren't actually that interesting, which really weighs it down. As an introduction arc, it serves its purpose, and both Luffy and Zoro teaming up, as well as Luffy's backstory, are the highlights, but I still wish they did more with this first arc. If I were to give this arc a rating, I'd probably give it a 5.4 out of 10. Still a positive rating, but a lot of room for improvement. Luckily, our next arc is that big improvement, so look forward to that in the coming weeks. Before I go, I thought other people may be as interested as I am to see how anime was received when it first came out compared to now. So when applicable, I'll be trying to find relevant information from way back when. While it's hard to find reviews for One Piece when it got published in 1997, I can find early forum posts and reviews from 2003 and 2004 at the earliest, just before 4Kids started to dub it in English. The general consensus I got was that One Piece was a really fun adventure series, but its art style is bizarre. A review on Anime News Network even said that its character designs take a lot to get used to, and that the art is more similar to a Western cartoon than it is to anime. While One Piece has its own style, nowadays I wouldn't say it's off-putting, and it's really not like a cartoon. I think anime has adopted a lot of different things that made One Piece stand out so much next to its contemporaries. And that'll be it for this video. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you want to be notified for the next review, be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you all next time.